Got it.
All right. I am here today with Devette Jones, and thank you for joining me today. We're here to talk about saving and holiday spending and what are some alternatives that we can do for our families in this holiday season that don't necessarily require us to buy the traditional gifts. So I'm going to turn it over. Actually, let me read a little bit, just a little bit of your bio. You're very not typical because you are not a typical person. For over 20 years, DeVette has served as a financial services professional serving clients nationwide working with the top U.S. investment companies, independent nationwide agency owner, and senior sales manager. You've written a book, Who Taught You How to Be Broke? 2022 Gold Elite producer and Diamond Income Ring recipient, featured speaker for the Society of Black Agents, United Way of Greater Knoxville Investment Committee. I could go on, but we only have a certain amount of time to speak to you tonight. And I can personally stamp you as solid because you have helped my family immensely, not just with life insurance, but you helped my daughter get on the pathway to savings early on. I think she was 15 or 16 when we started her Roth IRA. And to this day, she has a saver. She had just purchased a home at 23 years old, and she has many, a large amount of money in various financial instruments, and all of that I think came as part of her village, the savings part of her village, and that's you, Devette. So I'm going to turn it over to you to give us a good word tonight, and thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate you. I appreciate you so very much for being an A1 day one and
Mhm.
allowing me to be able to share my message out to anyone else who truly does want to really get a better financial footing for their life, for their family, and for their future. Because I think that's the most important thing is there's one thing that we cannot live without. When we think about it in the respect of can't live a day without oxygen, but money
Mm,
right up there next to oxygen. You can't go a whole day
right.
without spending money. So I want to be able to just kind of share a couple little things, like you said, to your point, make people think about money in a different way because it is one of those things that we're going to need for the remainder of our lives. So I'll go ahead and just kind of jump in here real quick and share my screen and we'll get this party rolling. Okay. All right. So since it's a little bit of holiday, I got my Aretha Franklins in there.
I hear that.
All right. So this is going to be the holiday
Respectg.
edition of Building Wealth Without Waste. Now, that's what a lot of people do. They want to waste their money. We want to treat ourselves. We are real notorious. We want to treat ourselves. But I want us to get to the place where we actually have something that is going to be there for us in the end. So, as we are going into Christmas, I want you to think about, of course, we always talk about what the reason for the season is, but I want you to also think about what is the purpose for your money. So if you're going in, and again, I have grandkids, I'm going to spend for my grandkids. I'm going to spend on my brother. He wants to grill. I want to, do some different things for my children, but we want to take this into consideration when we are starting our gift giving guide. We want to get something that we want, something that we need, something that we want to wear, something we want to read, which is very important, and something that we want to do. A lot of times people are just going into stores, just shopping, and they're buying things because, oh, well, this looks cute. But we want to be able to spend our money with purpose. One of the things that I have in my shirts that says invest intentionally. Every dime you spend is an investment. Now, whether you get a rate of return on that investment, it depends on how you're actually putting that money. So if you really want to put your money towards something that you need or something you can wear, that's going to give you a good or better rate of return on your investment. Reading, investing in yourself, being invested in your mind, and something that you want to be able to do, create experiences that you can be able to leverage that into a future opportunity. So I wanted to at least start off with the warm and fuzzy to say, yeah, I do believe in Christmas gifts. I believe in Christmas shopping, but we want to be very intentional about how we're spending our money. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, course, I have to get right to the nitty gritty because the one gift that I see right now that is the big high gift is these Ray-Ban, these Meta Ray-Ban glasses. So I want to be able to make sure that we have something that's going to say, hey, before I spend $250 on a set of Ray-Ban glasses, now they can take pictures and they can record, and I hear they're all of the buzz, but they're $250. And that's a one-time investment versus you taking that same $244 and putting it into a $100,000 life insurance policy. And that $250 per year into a life insurance policy on this 9-year-old kid is going to create $100,000 of generational wealth for your children's children. This is not money that you and I are going to end up spending. This is money that we want to be able to truly create generational wealth. So, as we're thinking about some of the things that we want, that $250 that we're about to blow on some Meta Ray-Ban glasses, we might also take into consideration what are we wanting to actually provide for our legacy. A lot of times we wait until the later in our lives before we start thinking about legacy. And the reality of it is we can start doing that for some of these kids now. And it's really affordable because even when we say this is $244, that's the annual price. That's for the year. That's less than $50 a month. And we spend $50 a month on McDonald's for our kids, just going and getting Happy Meals and things every other week. So if we could take that same little $10 that we were spending in value meals every week over 52 weeks and put that into a IUL or a permanent life insurance policy that builds cash value, then you're going to create that generational wealth that's going to be the death benefit. And you're also going to be able to create cash value that you can use for different things like college education, starting a business, just various things that you can use in your lifetime. So there's a policy that you do not have to die to use. You can use the cash value in your lifetime and still ensure that there's generational wealth for legacy upon legacy.
Now, who can fund this?
So typically, we want it to be your parents, your grandparents. Um, if you have custody of a child as an aunt or anybody else that's adopted a child, then you
Mhm.
can have an IUL. Basically, anybody who has an insurable interest. Now, I know a lot of aunties and uncles who want to do it for their nieces and nephews, and a lot of times they can't. When those are the circumstances, we want to go in and have a conversation with mom or dad. And maybe we can be real creative about making sure that there is an additional bank account that maybe auntie and uncle are funding into, but it's technically in mom's name as the owner.
Okay.
Mom is the beneficiary on it, but auntie and uncle wants to be able to create this as a generational wealth vehicle.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. Now, the next thing that I really want to talk about is paying ourselves first. Now, Jared's been around me long enough where I'll say it over and over again: pay yourself first, pay yourself often, pay yourself well. You deserve it. So, one of the cute little things that I did, of course, most people trying to, in this economy with this inflation, trying to figure out where they're going to get money for the holidays. I love this little word search I created the other day: finding the dough for the ho ho hos. So being able to find the dough, find the money, this is where we kind of remember back in the day we used to have Christmas funds at the bank and you would just have put that money into a Christmas fund. Well, you're paying yourself first. You're putting that money into that Christmas fund all year long, whether it's 25, $100, whatever the case may be. So then when you get to Christmas at the end of the year, then you're able to use that money for buying gifts, paying for other investments, whatever the case may be. So the same way that we've been talking about our 401ks, our 403bs, when they're taking that money out of our paycheck before we even get that money, that is a version of paying ourselves first. So whether it's the Christmas tree fund that you get at the bank or your 401k, the principle is still the same. Put the money into the savings account first. Put it somewhere where you will be able to pull from it at a later time and date. Now, depending on the investment, when we talk about a 401k, you got to really wait until you've left the job or you hit 59 and a half to be able to get all that money out penalty free. But being able to use a vehicle like the life insurance policy allows you to access the money at any time, as long as there is some insurable equity inside of the policy that you're able to touch. Sometimes that can take a few years to be able to establish, but I want people to start getting in the habit of one, protecting their insurability, getting life insurance before they are no longer able to be qualified. Because I've had a child who was diagnosed with a chronic illness at 16 years old and cannot get a policy again. So, because we had these life insurance policies, then we can go back into them. And I've done different things like using them to buy a house, I've used them to buy cars. I've used them to fund college education. I've used them to go on vacation. I've used them for a lot of different things over the last 22 years of me having my first cash value life insurance policy. So for me being able to throw money into my life insurance policy, it actually becomes my permanent Christmas fund. And I can use it all year round for anything else that I want to, whether it be business or personal. That fund is going to be available, and it also grows with the S&P 500. So that means that I'm earning interest on that money way more than you would at the bank, and I get to access it way faster than you could inside of your 401k. Okay, perfect. Now, everybody knows I talk about the 7 different accounts that every adult should have. And one of my favorites, the first time I ended up going viral, was because I had a picture of a 16-year-old who starts a Roth IRA and is going to be able to have a down payment on her house at 21 years old. Well, your daughter is living proof. It can happen. It does happen. You can start a Roth IRA in high school and be able to use it as a down payment on a house. But on top of just me talking about your Roth on a REIT, that's one of those great investments that we want to use. I want to talk about the 7 different accounts that I believe every adult should have. And I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. So, of course, we have your checking and savings accounts. Your checking account is to pay your bills. The savings account is for money that you're going to use in the next 12 months. Your Roth IRA, when you get your first job, and it doesn't matter if you're working at Kroger's, pushing buggies, if you are the baby on the bottle of Gerber, that is the Gerber baby food, you're a model. You got paid to be a model. So that was earned income. You can have a Roth IRA. Your 401ks, that's going to allow you to be able to put money into when you're a high earner. Both the Roth IRA and 401k are retirement accounts. When you put the Roth IRA in when you're young, when you're not making as much money, then you're able to take the money out tax free at 59 and a half, or for 5 different reasons: first time home buying, college education, death, disability, and retirement. However, in the 401k, you're going to pay taxes when you pull that money out at any time. And if you pull it out before 59 and a half, you'll get penalized. So we want to make sure that we have the money in the right buckets, because we don't want our young kids to be penalized 20% for taking their own money out of their investments when they need it the most. So that's why I'm really big on a Roth IRA. The annuities are real big. Pensions, we don't see any pensions anymore. We're considered hip, high income earners, but we are pensionless. And knowing that we are eventually going to get into retirement, we need to make sure that there's going to be a guaranteed income stream for the rest of my life. I know a lot of people, including yourself, have started using real estate as a form of a pension that's going to give you a check, that income stream. The annuity is the original pension. When we think about it, if you win the lottery today, they give you two options. They say, do you want to take the lump sum and invest it, or do you want to take the annuity, that guaranteed check that's going to come to you and your heirs for the rest of your life or whatever time period you prescribe? So that income stream, I tell people I can build a house without picking up a hammer when I use those annuities, because I trust you, I am not about to break these nails. All right. So a $50,000 permanent life insurance policy. I just like life insurance because there's too many GoFundMe accounts, there's too many fish fries, too many people trying to sell t-shirts. And I say 50,000. If you think about it, a funeral today costs 15,000. So what do you think the cost of it? The way that everything went up with inflation, the way our gas went up, our eggs, our milk, our just everything with tariffs went up inflation just over the last 6 years since COVID. What do you think the cost of a funeral is going to be in the year 2065? That's like when we're 90 years old, that 15,000 funeral is going to cost somewhere up of 40 to $50,000. So I want us to have something permanent and locked in, recognizing that our parents and our grandparents, you go in and you'll see that um, that have a life insurance policy, and it's like, your life insurance policy is only $5,000. Well, when they bought it in the 60s, that was the cost of a funeral. But now here we are in 2025, and we know that that funeral is going to be at least 10,000 upward. So they feel like, okay, well, that was a waste. Well, they didn't really have the foresight to think of what inflation would be and the cost of a funeral by the time they actually pass away. And I want something permanent because, again, I love a term policy. I have term policies as well. But when it comes down to it, a lot of those term policies will disappear when people get into retirement age, and they'll disappear because they lost them through the job, or the price and the premium on those goes up so expensive that when people get into retirement and they're in a fixed income, they can't afford to keep those policies anymore. Okay. Long-term care, HSAs, and disability plans are so important. We have so many of our parents and our grandparents that we, as Generation X, we feel like we're raising them because they have so many health challenges, they have so many financial issues, and they really did not take the time. And sometimes it was because they didn't have the education to know what to do in advance to plan for the situation when they couldn't go to work and they really were starting to lose their mental cognizance or they were having health problems. We want to be able to start setting those things up now. Sometimes we need to set them up for ourselves, just the same as we need to start putting money towards a fund for our parents, because we know a lot of times what ends up happening is when something happens to our parents, it falls back on us. So we really do have to start kind of leveraging our money into a position to say, I would rather start putting money aside for the future, because as much as we love those Ray-Ban glasses, they are not going to do anything for our parents and our grandparents when they get to a certain age and they need to maybe have a nurse to come to their home and sit with them and take care of us, because a lot of times we're not going to be able to do it. We have to get up and go to work. We have our own lives and our legacies that we're trying to build for the future ahead of us. However, we still want to make sure we're putting things in place for our parents and the ancestors who came before us, who helped us, who raised us, who loved us. Okay. And then, of course, our brokerage accounts. I call them the play money. So that's a great place to go in and pull some money out for Christmas and different things, because that's going to be your brokerage accounts like Fidelity, Vanguard, Charles Schwab, Robinhood, Stockpile, all of those different accounts that you're putting some money towards it. And we've had a great year in the S&P 500. I would love to be able to go and love for you to go into those and pull out a few $1,000s and spend that money, because it's there for playing. It's going to go up and down with the market. Sometimes the money's here, sometimes it's gone. So, with that being the case, I want to make sure that people understand where all of these fit into your proper bucket. Okay. Did you have questions, thoughts, ideas? Talk to me.
No, I'm listening and soaking it in, and this list I think is a good checklist for people to have around the dinner table at holidays. To
Absolutely.
really share this type of information, because we share a lot of different trends, speaking in this TikTok generation. But the
Mm-hmm.
trend that we sadly don't share enough is generational wealth. We talk about generational wealth as if it's a unicorn, but it's really just a matter of discipline and a matter of knowledge, as you mentioned before. My daughter always gets on me, and you do too sometimes, get on me about not being as financially astute as you guys are. But I didn't know. I didn't grow up with that education, and you obtained that education, and she was raised, to appreciate these things. And so, yeah, I
Right.
think that one thing I would say is when you get around that dinner table or you get around in between downs on football games, these are the conversations we need to start having with our family, especially as we get older and like you mentioned before, our loved ones get older and we have to prepare for the the not just their passing, but their living as well. So
Right.
this is all good
Right.
information.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, so let's keep moving forward with this. So I want to talk about some different comparison of investment vehicles, because when we think about money, a lot of times we're thinking of it from the standpoint of, oh, well, I have money and this is where my money is going. I'm putting into the savings account. I'm afraid of the stock market. I wanted them to really be able to have a visual of what the monies actually are supposed to be doing in your lifetime. So when you have a savings account, you're going to have your principal protected. It means you're not going to lose any money, but you also don't have as much earnings. You don't have as much growth on it. So of course, yesterday the the Feds decided to cut the interest rates again, that's going to cut the interest rates that are being paid over to the savings accounts. The same thing as the money markets and the CDs as well. So I remember, gosh, there used to be a time where people would say it back in the 80s that the savings interest rate was 10 and 14%. That is not our reality today. Before this Zoom, I jumped in and looked at my high yield savings account on Vanguard and it was paying 3.25%, where I know last year was probably paying closer to 4%. But again, those things are tied to the interest rate. Now, the interest rates, we love an interest rate cut because we go back in and say, oh, well, I can be able to refinance and buy a house cheaper, but your money is not making you as much money in those savings accounts. Now, we as a culture, we like a savings account, we like a CD, and we like a money market because we don't want to lose any money. And that's what principal protection is. We want to have that liquidity, being able to have access to that money without any loss. However, you really cannot save your way to wealth. You cannot have all of your assets in just that one bucket. So the next one you of course see is your equities in your stock market. And that's where we have usually the first exposure to that is going to be in our 401ks, 403bs, 457 plans that we have through the job. Those are going to be mutual funds. Maybe you have some independent individual stocks from the company that you work with, but those are really the first time that we have an opportunity to touch into the stock market. Now we've got different things like Robinhood, who's come into place where you see a lot of younger people are starting to set up their own brokerage accounts. They have Robinhood accounts. They're starting to do a little day trading, option trading, various things of that nature. They're good for growth potential, but it's called potential because you can make money and you can lose money. And that's why there's not a box, a check mark beside that under the principal protection box, because you could put all your money towards one stock and it can absolutely disappear tomorrow. Now, there's certain different investments that we would be able to utilize. Some are going to be a little bit safer than others when we start talking about our Dow Jones stocks versus being able to talk about some of the penny stocks. Then, yes, you're going to have a little more security in that. But do understand, if everybody gets mad at Disney tomorrow and they pull all their money out, well, Disney's been a company that's been around since the 1950s, but it can plummet. And the same thing when I think about Ford stock was one of those where the stock price was through the roof, but you go look at it, now, and you'll see that it's barely tracking at $10 a share. Whereas it was previously hundreds of dollars per share, but that also goes back to 30 or 40 years ago. So you want to make sure that you are paying attention to the stock market if you have money that's in equities, because it's a roller coaster ride. Your money can go up and down. The same thing is true with crypto, real estate, and gold. And we do tend to see real estate as one of those kind of stable investments, but most real estate investors will tell you that they've had a bad experience and they've had to go in and pull a lot of money out of their savings or their stock market to throw it back into the house because they had a disaster or they had a bad tenant, various things. So even though the value of that house has increased, they may have to put a lot of money towards that. Homeowners insurance, taxes, maintenance, all of these different things come along with that can make it kind of what we call a speculative investment. It can go up and down. So it's not a bad investment to have, but we just don't want to put all our eggs again in one basket. Now, the next two that I really delve in really heavily is index annuities, fixed index annuities, and the Vision Vault, which is the cash value life insurance, because it does give you all of the different options that we would want: principal protection, tax deferral, a guaranteed lifetime income stream when designed properly, and the growth potential. So you may have more growth potential in the stock market, but you're not going to lose money in the fixed index annuity and the life insurance, even though the index annuities and the life insurance, what I call the Vision Vault, still allows you to grow your money with the stock market. So it gives you a kind of a balanced investment that you can be able to use for multi different factions. Okay. All right. Now, this is a cute little chart that I wanted to share just so people can be aware of when you are building your investments, when you're looking at starting to save your money, you really want to build them from this pyramid. And this pyramid is going to be, you build your pyramid from the bottom. You do not build it from the capstone. So a lot of people want to go in and buy Bitcoin because they're wanting to just get the biggest investment or the most popular investment, but they really do need to start with the baseline. And that's going to be their checking and savings account, their CDs, their money market, just money at the bank, emergency funds, being able to have money that says, hey, you spent all this money for Christmas, but what if we go into another government shutdown January 30th? Because that's kind of the buzz. So if we go into another government shutdown, then can you go back and use any of those Christmas gifts to be able to pay your bills, your two utility bills, to pay your mortgage, to keep food on the table? It's a really difficult conversation to have. Even a whole shutdown that we had before was really based on the fact of health insurance. What's going to happen with people who are using the Affordable Care Act, where if they were paying $100 a month in January, are they going to have to start paying $400 a month? Those monies that are starting coming from those liquid investments, no returns, checking account, savings account, but they have a purpose. They give us value in our day-to-day lives. So we want to make sure that we are putting money towards those liquid vehicles. Then you want our tax-free vehicles, cash value life insurance, Roth IRAs, and municipal bonds to be able to say, if I needed to pull that money out, I don't want to give all that money back to Uncle Sam in taxes. I want to be able to enjoy it for myself, right? Then we have our long-term or moderate risk investments, and those are going to be our 401k, our index funds, our exchange traded funds. Everybody loves to talk about the S&P 500 funds, VOO, and mutual funds. Those are all going to be long-term. We want to be able to let those sit for somewhere between a 7 to 15 year time horizon. We like to say 10, but markets go through cycles. And of course, as we've been able to look at that over the past few years, then we recognize that sometimes we put our money into a stock and it doesn't seem like it's growing for a very long time. And then boom, soon as we pull the money out, that's when it takes off. So we have to be really considerate about leaving that money and not touching that money, because we know that it may take a little longer, but when it grows, oh, it's going to grow like nobody's business, right? So we definitely want to give it enough space to do what it needs to do. And then our high risk, high return options are going to be some stocks. They're going to be some options, real estate investment trust, and investment properties. Those are things that are going to probably give us the most amount of money, but we recognize that even though they give us the most amount of money, they probably are going to cost us the most amount of money. A lot of times when people will say, I earn 15% in the stock market, well, that's great. You can earn 15% on $100, and that's going to make you $15. Well, that ain't nothing to write home about, but we love to say that we made 15%, right? Versus you making 15% on $100,000. And now we're like, hey, now that'll actually buy a car. That'll pay a bill. That's some money to write home about. So 15% is still 15%. It's about where the money is placed. And of course, you see the top of the pyramid is going to be our speculative gambling type investments, our Forex, our Bitcoin, our commodities, our arts, collectibles, still worth having, but you know that you could very much put your money into it, and today they could be here, tomorrow they will be gone. And even still, when it comes to Bitcoin, I'm not against Bitcoin by any means, but it only needs to be a small percentage of your portfolio because most people need more stability. When we even think about a lot of the wealthy and the affluent people, they are putting 5% of their portfolio. Well, they're worth millions of dollars. So for them to put $50,000 towards Bitcoin is easy for them because it's not impacting the rest of their financial plan. But for the average individual to come put $50,000 into Bitcoin, well, that may be your whole nest egg. And that's not going to suit your financial purpose. Just because somebody else did it at a higher net worth and income bracket does not mean that you need to invest at that same level. You just need to be at that same percentage, and you'll be able to receive the same growth. Should there be some, you will be able to receive the same growth in a matter of time. Okay. All right. How much time do we have? I don't want to. I don't want to get boring. Awesome. Awesome. Okay.
Give me about 15, 20 minutes, maybe.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Perfect. So I wanted to talk about retirement, and this kind of goes back to when we start thinking about people who have a lot of money and what they're doing with their money. I want to go back to one of the basics of retirement because again, there's two kind of ways to retire. You can voluntarily retire 65 when you have enough money in the bank, and you have involuntary retirement. It means you get sick or you get hurt or you get laid off or you get fired and you don't know where your next paycheck's coming from, right? A lot of times we'll have your 401ks, 403bs, your big investments like that. Outside of your home, typically your retirement accounts, your 401k is probably the next biggest asset that most Americans have. But what they don't realize, because it is usually stock market invested, that there is something called the 4% rule. The 4% rule says whatever your account balance is, you can only take 4% of it if you want that money to last you for 20 to 30 years, right? So in this scenario, if someone had $1 million inside of a 401k, they were to take out 4% per year, that would be $40,000. Now, how many people do you know that has $1 million and only want to live on 40,000? I know a lot of the people from the fire movement want to do that, but most of us don't live on $40,000 incomes now. So think of that like $1 million nest egg. You got $1 million bucket, and you're only allowed to spend 4%. If you spend more than that, then you run out of money, right? Because we want our money to still stay invested. We have a thing called the sequence of returns. That means one year there's going to be a bad year. You may have good year, good year, good year, then bad year. And you don't want to take out too much money in a down year when the market is down, because that's contrary to one of the financial principles that we've all heard, which is buy low, sell high. When you're taking money out of the stock market in a down year, then you're selling low. So we want to be able to strategically take a certain amount of money out of our investment accounts, our retirement accounts, so they can last us for the longest period of time. So I wanted to be able to share that because I think that's one of those foundational rules. People just have a big chunk of money and they feel like I can spend it all. It's my money. I worked for it. I want to be able to spend it the way I want to. And I want them to really understand that we have to take these things in percentages. We really have to look at the purpose for those monies so we don't end up blowing them all away. And that's what happened to a lot of our parents and our grandparents who had 401ks, and maybe they didn't have a whole lot in it. They went through 2008. So their 401k went to a 201k. They lost half of the balance. And then behind that, we had to come back and recognize that there was a down market. They were taking out of the money while the market was down, and they spent it really fast. They went through it really fast. And you know where they all ended up? In blue vests at Walmart, taking new jobs, working at McDonald's. They started working these jobs because they lost their jobs and now they retired, and then they had to go back to work just so they could be able to make ends meet to keep up with inflation. So I wanted to help people to understand that because most people aren't taught that. We're taught, well, listen, when you get grown, you make your money, you can buy whatever you want. We were taught you got some McDonald's money. So there's were different dynamics that we were taught as a culture. If you get you a good job with benefits, then you'll just be fine. That we're starting to recognize that's not the reality for a lot of people. And that's one of the important things when it comes down to financial planning. We want to make sure that we understand some of these foundational rules, where to put our money, how to spend our money, and to make our money go over all those different buckets. Because I get it. I gave you 7 different buckets, but I want you to have 7 different investment accounts because I promise you, I know that you got more than 7 different bills, right? So the same way that we giving the money to some of y'all got more than 7 different streaming accounts: Sirius XM Radio, Spotify, Hulu, Netflix, Disney Plus, Paramount. We got all of them 7 different streaming and HBO. Then don't we need to have 7 different accounts? Because you giving them. Never mind. Let me stop because
Now you
I get
you
on my little
you
tangent.
you telling on me. You telling on me.
Go pay yourself first. Go on and pull up that Roth IRA and put some more money in it.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
But I did want to talk about some of the factors impacting financial planning because I think this will help people to really understand. Now, in this season, we've seen that increased longevity. My grandmother lived till 94. We are seeing some of our people who are living longer and longer. And the longer you live, the more money you're going to need, right? That's the one thing about it. My brother's a personal trainer. Well, everybody likes to say that your health is your wealth. Well, that's fine. You better have some wealth to go with that health that's going to take you into 80, 90, and 100 years old. Or if not, you're still going to be working at 80, 90, and 100 years old. Okay. So we want to be able to make sure we understand that the increased longevity is going to require us to have a bigger nest egg, more money. Inflation. Now, I remember the first time I went to Buddy's Barbecue to go get me some of my wings, and my wings used to be $8.73. And I did a whole TikTok video about this. It was one of the first times I went viral back in 2020, 21. And I said, y'all, I just got hit with the chicken tax because they had gone up from $8.73 to like $9.25. Well, that was just a 50 cents difference. But I recognize, because I go and get them all the time, I recognize that, whoa, the price of this just went up. So when we think about some of our parents and our grandparents, the first time they bought a burger from McDonald's, they only paid 5 cents for it. How much is a burger from McDonald's now? Like you can go get a dollar menu a burger, but a Big Mac is going to really cost you about $3 to $5, right? Depending on if you get a value meal, but just the sandwich alone. Sometimes the sandwich alone for a Whopper, I know I spend $5 on just a sandwich, no fries, no drink. But inflation, we've seen all of that in the last few years. Matter of fact, I actually went back to Buddy's to get me some wings today, and they were $13. They have gone in the last 5 years from $8 and change to $13 and change. $5 worth a year inflation in 5 years. That is unbelievable. So we know that we're in a high inflation environment right now. We know some of the narrative is about affordability. These are all things, are reasons why we invest. We invest our money because we want to make 7, 8% to keep up with inflation. Most people think they invest to get rich. The reality is, if you go back, your financial advisor will tell you, no, we invest to keep up with inflation. We want our dollars to have the same purchasing power in the future as the things that we want to be able to buy now. And if you so happen to get rich in the process, if you stick with your paying yourself first and throwing extra money towards that, then you would absolutely have a bigger nest egg and you would feel more financially secure. If you pick the right stock, you might get rich. You might get rich. but picking the right stock is almost like playing the lotto. If you get the winning tickets, you get the winning tickets. If not, then you are just making a systematic investment. And again, I prefer you do it inside of your investment accounts than doing it at the corner store with the lotto. Okay. Um, Continued employment and retirement. We are starting to see people who are still working, and they're a lot of times they're doing it just for the healthcare. They're just staying at the job, whether they're working in part time or they're staying there just for the healthcare. Now, you also have people who, like me, I love my job. I love to be able to talk to people and socialize and go on the trips and help people. So, yes, you're starting to see a new dynamic of retirement. We're not just going and sitting in the lazy boy, the Barker lounger, and just kicking our feet up. We want to be able to do something that stimulates our mind, that keeps us active, that keeps us young, that keeps us healthy. So, we are actually looking at a space where we're going to have a continued employment in retirement, and we want to be able to put that into the plan. Future tax increases is something that is going to be really a big idea. I actually was listening to a webinar earlier today, and with the one big beautiful bill, they talked about how certain retirees who are 65 ish, 65 plus, then they're getting an extra $6,000 deduction on their taxes because the one big beautiful bill said that they were going to make it where Social Security was not taxable. Well, here's the problem. Social Security was already supposed to go broke in the year 2020, in the year 2034. Now they're projecting with the reduction in revenue that's coming in from the taxes off of Social Security, then it's probably going to go broke in the year 2032. Right. That's 7 years from now. You and I will not be retired, and we will not be Social Security retirement eligible age in the next 7 years. So, what is the country going to have to do? They're going to have to increase taxes to be able to put money back into the Social Security trust. They're going to have to increase taxes to keep up on the interest rates that they have on the national debt. The national debt sitting at almost $39 trillion right now. So I'm a huge believer that taxes are going to have to increase in the future. And that's why I love a good tax-free investment like our Roth IRAs and our life insurance policy. Number five, the less reliance on pensions. Most people don't have pensions. I'm even with a lot of the veterans. I love that the veterans are getting their VA disability checks because those are a form of pensions, even if they're not getting a pension. They didn't do 20 years and was able to get a true military pension. They are getting that VA disability check. That is a guaranteed check every month for the rest of their life. No matter how long they live, they get that check. And a lot of people, including my father, he's in retirement. He gets a Social Security check, which is also an income stream, and he also gets his disability check. If it were not for those two checks, because he had already blown through all of his 401k money, then he would not have any money in retirement. So, being able to recognize everybody didn't go to the military like myself, so I will never get a disability check. And Social Security, like we said, number six, the uncertainty of Social Security potentially to go broke in the year 2032, then I need to be able to create my own pension. My grandfather worked on the railroad. He got a pension when he got to retirement. He got a check every month. It didn't matter what the 401k did. A lot of our parents didn't know anything about financial planning and investments because they had the right investments. And those were those pensions and annuities that allowed them to say, no matter what the market does, I'm going to get a check, and that check is going to come consistently no matter how long I live. Those are the best investments. That's why pensions, that's why your Social Security is a version of a pension. That's why your VA disability check, that's another version of the pension. As I mentioned before, if you win the lottery, they're going to give you two options. They're going to say, do you want to take the lump sum or do you want to take the annuity, that pension, have that a guaranteed income stream? Real estate, that's why people use that because they're creating that income stream. So understanding the income stream, passive income, that's been one of the big buzzwords. Maybe that just goes back to the fact that we don't have pensions through our jobs anymore. And now we've got to replicate those systems as best as possible with these other vehicles that we have available. Again, I talked about the uncertainty of Social Security, the growing need for long term care. I've talked about that a little bit as well. As our parents are living longer, well, they're living longer and they're healthier, but they may have some mental decline. They are needing someone to come into the house and take care of them. Modern medicine is getting better, so we have a doctor and a pill for everything, but that just makes it stay here, has a need for us to stay here longer. And as we're here longer, maybe one body part is getting better, but another one may need some assistance. We might want to have somebody to come in and just help and cook a couple of meals and fold some clothes, but that long-term care, we don't necessarily, does everybody doesn't have to go to a nursing home. Sometimes we want home health care, someone to come into our home and take care of us. Even thinking about a lot of the vets and people in the military, you know, you have the VA, but do you want to go to Johnson City? Leave your house, leave everything that you know here in this area in Knoxville to go to Johnson City, just go live in their long-term care facility. And that's if they have the space for you, if they have a bed for you, because again, there are so many people who have long-term care needs. So I want people to start thinking about that, creating a plan for that now, not only for our parents, but for ourselves, because we don't want to leave the burden to our children, right? We want to be able to create a plan that says if something were to happen to me, maybe I do want to go to the nursing home, but I picked the one that I want to go to and it's nice and I know it's going to cost me $5,000 a month, but I have set up a $5,000 a month plan that will allow me to be comfortable and I'm not a burden to my children and my grandchildren. I can absolutely let them live and enjoy their lives, and I can be in a comfortable, safe, warm environment that is going to allow me to have the best quality of life for the rest of my life. Make sense? All right. So think that is about it. There are several different ways that you can build a house without picking up a hammer. And again, you can go to my website, iamwealthynow.com, and we can talk about some of these different vehicles and figure out how do we build your financial house? How do we put your financial house in order so you will be able to have the security? That's one thing that we love about home ownership. It's something tangible. It's the security that says that I know that I always have something that's going to be able to take care of me. Let's build up our financial houses. Let's get them in order as well. All right. That's
Thank
all I
you.
got
Hey,
for
that's
now.
that's
I,
more that's
I
more
can
than
keep
enough.
talking, but look,
No, no, no. That's a lot. And one of the things I just wanted to comment, um, for many of us, money is a thing, right? We just think about it or not think about it actually. We make it, spend it, save it if we can. But these long-term solutions that you've talked about are things that we can do now. You can buy your like you mentioned, some God forbid your teenager gets a illness, a long-term illness that makes them unable to get life insurance at a later stage, and God forbid if they should, pass away at a certain age. Those things are things we don't want to deal with, which is what I was going to talk about just a little bit. How would you broach some of these subjects of life insurance with otherwise healthy or otherwise young or otherwise uh, not thinking about that part of our life, which is the end of our life?
Sure, sure. Well, a lot of times we go back to the Rockefeller method. You know, the Rockefellers, they create life insurance policies, $1 million life insurance policies on their babies the day that they're born. And all
Mhm.
of that money goes into the trust fund. And they also are able to use that cash value inside of it. Hey, do you remember those commercials that used to come on TV that says, have you started saving for your kids' college education? Why,
Hmm.
yes, we have the Gerber Grow Up Plan. That Gerber Grow Up Plan was talking about the cash value in the life insurance policy and using that for their college education. Nobody had to die to be able to use that. So, number
Hmm.
one, we want to go back to just making sure that we help people to understand you want to buy life insurance where they're young and healthy. And they want to show them these examples of how the wealthy and the affluent have absolutely used life insurance as an investment vehicle from the time that they were 2 weeks old. Because you can buy a life insurance policy on a baby as soon as they turn 2 weeks old. I've got a couple of clients right now. I'm waiting on those babies to turn 2 weeks old so I can immediately write those. My twins, my grand twins, I had their policies written before the day they were born. They were cesarean, so we knew what day they were born. I was waiting on that 2 week day to hit the button because each of them have a $50,000 policy. That is $100,000 of generational wealth that I'm going to leave to my grandchildren's grandchildren. And this is the thing, those policies cost $16 a month. So for now, they've gone up a little bit and they're $19 a month for new policies. But when I bought them then, they were $16.04 a month. I'm able to create $100,000 of generational wealth. I'm building $100,000 house for my great great grandchildren, and it's costing $40 a month.
Mm.
So once they start looking at the math, and mind you, even when it comes to a home, you know, if anybody buys their primary residence, they know it takes about 30 years to pay that off, right? They rush to pay it off. But the reality of it is, all of these investment strategies still require time. So if you start comparing it to other investments that they know and being able to say, like, say, here, I can build a house without picking up a helmet. I can give $100,000 generational wealth like someone would buy a house, leave as a legacy, it's legacy for their family, and then their family sells it or splits it or rents it out. It, depending on how the policy is set, you can be able to truly set your life insurance policy up where it gives you an income stream. Remember those Gerber policies, they were talking about pulling the cash value out. And this ain't nothing new. Our grandparents used to do it way back in the day
Mhm.
when somebody needed bail money. And they would go inside that life insurance policy and they would pull
Yeah.
out the bail money, right? That whole life
Mhm.
policies. They were absolutely doing that. It was a
Yeah.
forced savings account that was built inside of their life insurance. Now, still a term life insurance policy is great. I love a convertible term life insurance. So I looked at a 43-year-old today for a $100,000 life insurance policy. It was going to cost $20 a month. You're create again, 43 years old, healthy, being able to save $23 a month. That was a 20-year plan. That'll take them from 43 to 63. We will need to create a plan before 63, being able to either convert a portion of it or buy additional permanent insurance. But recognize if anything were to happen to you within those 20 years for $23, that would be $100,000 that could be left to your family. That ends fish
Mhm.
fries. That ends GoFundMe. That
Yeah.
ends a whole lot of financial problems. You're able to pay for kids' college educations. You're able to put money back for people who can't go to work because they're grieving. How many times
Mhm.
we as a culture we have to keep going back to work when we are depressed and we got anxiety and we're grieving the lost one, our lost loved ones. But we've got no, we got the slavery mentality. We got to pick up and keep going. Even though we're dealing with this trauma, we don't go to therapy. We don't get the time to really be with our thoughts, our feelings, and our emotions. But we can't do
Yeah.
that when we got to go back to work. So being able to have that money for those life insurance policies says that I can take 6 months off, I can heal, I can grieve, I can make sure the mortgage is paid, I can let the stress be off of me. Those are all the different things that life insurance does.
Mm. Well,
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And that gives a lot of clarity, I think, to the difficult conversations, like I said, with people who don't want to face the unfortunate reality that, this nobody gets out alive of this
No,
thing called life.
that's true.
And it's bigger than just us.
Yeah.
Like you said, you've mentioned many times in this conversation that it's about your grandkids and leaving legacy. And you mentioned the Rockefellers, and there was a documentary I watched one time where these I think it was one of the from Johnson and Johnson
Okay.
families. They have a annual sort of retreat for their
Yes.
family where they discuss the financial health of the
Absolutely.
family trust and so forth. So, I mean, just the thought of that was something I had never even, I couldn't fathom that when I first
Yeah.
saw it.
Yeah.
But those type of things are reality to many people, and unfortunately, our culture, Black American culture, hasn't really embraced that completely. Many of us have the means to live a good life, but unfortunately, it may be one generation of good life.
Right.
And it can be multi generations of a good life. And a foundation has to start with us. So
Absolutely.
as I've said and you've mentioned, my daughter, has a life insurance policy. That was the first thing I think I got. And it was difficult, to be honest with you. It was a difficult, not decision, but it was a difficult contemplation. Like, am I wishing death on my child? Am I gonna benefit from
Mm.
her passing and stuff? Am I making money? But at the reality of it is, as you mentioned, I saw so many people who had untimely deaths, whether it was accidents or whether it was illnesses and unforeseen circumstances of all type. And they hit the GoFundMe's and that kind of thing, and that's not only, like you said, you have to deal with that. Now you have to deal with your grief and all this other stuff. So yeah, I just really want to just thank you for giving people the education that we really didn't have as young people, and as we mature and know better, we can do better. And I
Absolutely.
really believe that. So again, thank you. Any last words before we sign off?
Uh, Always pay yourself first, pay yourself often, and pay yourself well. I absolutely am imperative. Oh my goodness. Apparently, everybody in my family calling me. I wonder what's going on.
Uh-oh. Mhm.
But no, pay yourself first, pay yourself often, pay yourself well. You deserve it. It's your money. It's your last name. Put your money towards your last name. Don't
Yes,
give
ma'am.
your money to all of these different buildings and restaurants and stores. Put your money towards your own last name. Let's create a foundation for your family. And you could always find me at my website at lifevisionsolutions.com, or I am wealthy now, which is my favorite, where I'm a big affirmations person. I am wealthy now.com. So you can schedule an appointment with me and we can talk about your unique situation, complimentary consultations. We have plans that start again as low as $50, $100 a month to plans that can be $20,000, $100,000 investment strategies. So we can definitely work with people no matter what their situation is. Just really find someone who resonates with you, who's going to help you with your financial plan and really grow the money, quit blowing the money.
That's a perfect place to end. And happy holidays to you and your family. I love and cherish you. And thank you, thank you, thank you.
Love you, baby. I appreciate you.
Yes,
Happy
ma'am.
holidays.
All
Take
righty.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. Okay.